It is very hard to obtain one definition for terrorism. In an attempt to gain something from the multiple definitions found, here I have curated one. Violence, or the threat of violence, against non-combatants or civilians, usually motivated by religious, political, or ideological beliefs. But for us to understand this better, here is what terrorism is not. It is not organized crime. Organized crime is primarily profit motivated, whereas terrorism is generally politically fueled or socially motivated. Secondly, organized criminals don't usually seek media attention. Terrorists do. That is their weapon. Looking closer at the recent Sydney siege, we can see how our media has an important role in presenting terrorism. The Shahada flag was used in the Sydney siege to create a link to Islam, but also to draw the world's attention towards terrorist links to ISIS. The flag intentionally created political and ideological connotations to the attack at the Link Cafe earlier this year. The Shahada flag is a general expression of faith in Islam. Many extremist groups use similar Islamic State flags which grab the world's attention. Those similar flags create affiliation to terrorist groups, but the flag used in this instance was an Islamic flag, not Islamic State. The origins of the flag go back to Muhammad's black standard military banner. The colour black is used in many other flags. This is showing their support for Muhammad's reign. In Chitty's Law Journal, an article called Terrorism and the Media discusses how the media aids terrorists. The media is the indispensable carrier of the message. The transmission of that message in the form and manner dictated by the terrorist is a purpose scarcely less important to him than the accomplishment of the act which he desires to publicize.
Of this banner. So for that, I turn to Jonathan Bloom, professor of Islamic art just down the road at Boston College. Let's start, Jonathan, by describing this flag. What does it look like?
Well, it's a black rectangle, and it has 2 or sometimes 3 lines of writing in white. The top one says, La ilaha illallah, there is no God with a small g, except for God with a capital G. And then in the middle, there's a sort of rough circle that says Muhammad Rasulullah, Muhammad is the messenger of God. And then sometimes below, you have a line of much fancier writing that says the state of the Islamic Caliphate, Dawlat Khilafat al-Islamiyah.
I mean, it's become so iconic now. The sight of it instills fear. I suppose that's part of the propaganda of this. As flags, as a symbol, do you think this is a successful one?
Graphically, yes. Without even knowing a word of Arabic, you can tell what it means. The iconography transcends the semantics of the words.
I mean, it's also interesting, too. I mean, I think of the Nazi swastika and how that was kind of an ancient icon that was reappropriated by the Third Reich.
Right.
This is kind of doing the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, that if everyone starts identifying their use of this phrase, it's sending very much the wrong message if we all accept that this is what that message means. They are co-opting something that has brought millions of people over thousands of years great comfort and solace and meaning in their lives.
So why do we constantly produce new media items of terrorist behaviour for the world to see? A journalist's job is to source out the news others cannot obtain, but sometimes they highlight stories too often, which makes them seem normal. What happened to the news flash? Why don't we reveal breaking news worthy of worldwide vision in a short, succinct way? John Oliver highlights the humility and entertainment factor found in news blasts, and in this instance, terrorism.
Meanwhile, in a week of horrible news about terrorist incidents around the world, there was one unexpectedly encouraging development.
You know, for months, Nigeria's army has been trying to flush out the Islamic sect of Boko Haram militants in hiding. Well, now it appears they're leaving voluntarily, at least some of them. According to the Vanguard, they're being driven out of the forest by snakes and bees.
What? Snakes and bees? I never thought I'd say this, but thank goodness for that angry swarm of snakes and bees. Thank you, snakes. Thank you, bees. The only way I could love this story more would be if those bees were actually riding the snakes into battle. On my signal. Slither! Slither!
Humour and airtime given to the terrorists is highly unnecessary. We are giving them exactly what they want. But on an objective stance, are we diminishing the fear connected to terrorists by doing these sorts of news stories? In a journal article about terrorism and its links to Islam, Paul Burton discusses the connotations condemning terrorists to the one religion. He reminds the reader of a case where a man with a Caucasian name, who was a former US military weapons specialist with possible mental health issues, had links to a terrorist plot. He reiterates the fact that no one remembers that instance and it has almost been swept under the carpet. This is the case with many other terrorism plots happening in China, Korea, Norway, Ireland and the US, which we hardly heard anything about. So why is there so much attention to the Islamic world? The sensationalism connecting Islam to terrorism inevitably produces more attention than other cases. Huntington's clash of civilizations. Conflict is natural rather than aberrant. People's cultural and religious identities will be the primary sources of conflict in the post-Cold War. The West is using international institutions, military power, and economic resources to run the world in ways that will maintain Western dominance in all aspects. By referring to Huntington and Burton, we can see how there is a clear stigma classifying terrorism and Islam in an intrinsic, undeniable affiliation. Chitty reveals the media's important and intrusive relationship with terrorism, which I believe results in finding a euphemism for terrorism, which is Islamic terrorism. Symbols like the Shahada flag and other Islamic flags are used by terrorists which loses their previous religious meanings. This is caused by improper use and also being projected by media throughout the world. Instilling fear and conclusions are now irreversible when a normal citizen would see these flags without extensive research being conducted.